Kathleen Barry is an activist, scholar, professor, and her latest book, Unmaking War, Remaking Men, How Empathy Can Reshape Our Politics, Our Soldiers, and Ourselves. And I want to read a little plug here. It's kind of small. From Medea Benjamin that I just read, and it's a very good plug. And she says, of Kathleen Barry's latest book, how can we end war if we don't understand the makings of war? Kathleen Barry's Unmaking War, Remaking Men is a remarkable blend of history, current war making, and soul searching that unravels the very structures of war. Her fascinating questions, ranging from why don't the Geneva Conventions protect the rights of combatants, to why are women in the peaceful nation of Costa Rica subjected to outrageous levels of masculine violence, lead to her analysis that the unmaking of war requires the rehumanization of men. Read it, get energized, and join us in Barry's ultimate challenge, replacing the paradigm of war with a paradigm of shared human consciousness based on empathy. And that's Medea Benjamin, Code Pink. So let's give a warm welcome to Kathleen Barry.
I was so glad when I got that comment from Medea Benjamin that I used it as the description for the book. On the postcards that were done on the book, I couldn't do any better in describing my own book than she did. It was really very generous. First of all, I was walking down the street before coming in here, and I just have to say this personal note. I used to live in Berkeley. I studied at Berkeley. And it is so good to be back in Berkeley doing this kind of thing, because in 1979, when Female Sexual Slavery, my first book, was published, I was speaking in these stores on this street, and my friends from that time, some of my friends from that time, are here now. And I've lived in a lot of different places, so I end up going back to places, you know, that I've lived in. But there's no nostalgia like Berkeley nostalgia, you know, when you get that I'm back home kind of feeling. So it's really, really good to be here. And thank you, Jacob Van Vliet, for organizing this event and for providing this opportunity for both Project Censored, Mickey Huff, and myself with my new book. I'd like to begin by asking, I'd like to begin first by saying that the subject is war. The subject is violence and masculinity and violence. It's a tender subject. And so with that in mind, I'd like to know if any of you in here have served in combat or been in the military or have friends and loved ones who are now in combat. Thank you very much for coming, and it means a lot to have you here. And I hope that we'll be able to open up a really important discussion. Are we okay? Good. This book began for me with a question. It was 2006. I was spending a leisurely summer recovering from an illness, watching the television a lot, and all day, every day, reports of bombing in Lebanon from the Israeli war in Lebanon. And unlike with the American wars, when other countries bomb other countries, the casualties are referred to loss of innocent life. You know, when Americans kill civilians, are called collateral damage. But this term, loss of innocent life, which I've heard all my life, and I know all of you have heard this term many, many times over, started bugging me for some reason. Why at this point in time, I don't know. But it really started aggravating me. And I'm walking up and down and I'm pacing, and what is going on with this term? And then it finally dawned on me that as soon as we say, as a people, as a civilization, as a country, as a society, as soon as we say that there's a group of people who should not and cannot be killed during war, even though most nations engaged in war now ignore that almost completely. But even though saying that in the Geneva Conventions and even in our everyday parlance, as soon as you say that there's a group of people who cannot be killed, should not be killed, it would be a crime to kill them, violation of human rights to kill them, you have said that there is a killable group of people. And that was daunting to me. I hadn't planned on writing a book on masculinity and war. I had 4 books out at that point, and I supposed I would get onto another book at some point. But this question got a hold of me, and I couldn't let go of it. And so the first thing I needed to do was kind of explore that question. And of course, you go to the Geneva Conventions and you see that they say, that the conventions themselves say that civilians, that women, children, elderly, they spell it all out, are not to be harmed in war and not to be targeted. Again, so somebody can be targeted, somebody can be harmed. And it doesn't take a whole lot of logic to get from there to men. Although there have been some women in combat, and the U.S. still officially does not assign women to combat, traditionally, historically, combat has been the job of men. The expectation of men. Therefore, the socialization of masculinity. If you can't kind of quite get somebody to think about going to war and killing other people and maybe getting killed when they're 19 or 20 or 24 years old, unless there's been a preparation for that, a socialization for it, which I have found in my work around the world to be nearly universal in terms of a socialization that kind of prepares men for war. And this leads me then to talking about the masculinity of war. I can't get into all the details of that socialization right now because of time limits, but it's developed carefully in the book. But suffice it to say that can you still hear me okay if I step back, because I'm getting a little popping on this? Yeah. You're okay? And so suffice it to say that this is the dream come true for the military. The military works as a recruiter of young people for war because socialization has already set it up and is involved in putting it into place. I then found myself needing to talk to veterans, to men who've been in combat, to people who have had to kill and have had their own lives on the line. There's a place up here if you'd like to come up toward the front. And so then you look at military training, and particularly today, you look at the kind of focus and emphasis that the military has in its training, with one of its primary objectives being not only to teach soldiers to kill, but since before the Vietnam War, but through Vietnam and up to now, the wars now, to kill without remorse, to kill without feeling, to kill without any sense of guilt or shame, to kill with a sense that it's your patriotic duty. And this is even before you think about killing just to save your own life, or more likely your buddy's life. Because that's the other thing that military training sets up, is this kind of buddy system, which I see and talk about in this book as a perversity of true friendship, where a buddy is the guy next to me whose back I've got and who I'm responsible for seeing that he doesn't get killed, just as this buddy is responsible for me to see that I don't get killed. And so we're all responsible for each other. And what almost any soldier who has served in Iraq or Afghanistan will tell you is that the reason that they are there is to save their buddies. Follow that one step further, and we see that who the enemy is then is those who are not the soldiers' buddies. It's not usually talked about in this way, but if you scrape everything, all of the patriotism that's built up around this and the language around this, you scrape this all away, and what you see then is it's not an accident that there, or an occasional event, that there's massacres. That I was just handed by someone who came this evening this report from the Associated Press. Army prosecutors this May 17th filed charges Tuesday against 6 Washington state-based soldiers in a plot to murder Afghan civilians for sport during patrols in Kandahar province last year. These kinds of things are not the extreme unusual cases. When you start looking at all the extreme unusual cases, you start finding, and as soldiers from Iraq veterans against the war have clearly stated, these kinds of things are daily in combat now. In combat zones, let me put it that way, in combat zones in Iraq, Afghanistan, and of course we're moving on with these. And so there isn't a real distinction between soldier and civilian, and in fact, that kind of approach, I'm here to protect my buddy, anybody who's not my buddy is my enemy or my potential enemy, is actually enemy making. Because after all, there were not people, a group of people armed and ready to fight, called insurgents in Iraq before the U.S. Army got there. They came out of some place and they came for some reason. Not necessarily the sport of killing, but the random and preventative killing that I saw from this study going on in Iraq. Do you want to come? There's one seat in the front.
I'm going to get some more.
And some more are coming. So please come down and please make yourself comfortable. This altogether is then something that I refer to as the masculinity of war. And I just want to read one brief section from the book, which we usually do at book events at bookstores. This is from a soldier from Vietnam War that I interviewed. I was interested in knowing what the experience of killing in war is for those who have had to do that and who do it. And so I asked Steve, he spoke not about killing but of taking someone out. And I knew, he started talking about the group. It was about being part of the group. Because everybody in the group was doing this. He hadn't killed anybody, and so he wasn't really part of the group. I knew that Steve was going to continue talking about how it felt to make it into the group, the club. I interrupted his narrative. Before shifting to the others, the club, I wanted to know about him. I wanted him to tell me how he felt the first time he killed another human being. staying in the present tense of the firefight that he was talking about, using his own words for killing, I asked him, so when you take someone out, what happens to you? To keep our attention close to this experience, I continue in the present tense. He tears up, but his reference point is still the other guys, his buddies. Essentially, you join a club, he said to me. And there's a long pause. I think, he's wondering if I get it. I see behind his words that he's questioning whether I can possibly comprehend how important it is to be part of that club at that moment. And then he continued, that you can never leave. Quiet, tears, just a few. Then I can barely hear him say, you become part of a fraternity. And then another really long pause. My unanswered question still hangs heavily over us. Finally, in almost a whisper, I think the closest I can get to it, you inadvertently have a hole. There's a long pause, he looks away, then to the floor, in your soul. Huge tears that had welled up in his eyes dropped directly to the floor while I tried to hold mine back. I read this because it is very reflective of what I have heard from many, many soldiers who have been in combat. They may talk about having been diagnosed with PTSD, and if they have, they're still waiting for treatment for it, usually. But what most of them will say is, I lost my soul. I was talking just 2 nights ago about this book and talking about this story, and a man who must have been at least 75 years old came up to me afterwards with a very solemn, not sad, but a very solemn face, and looked at me and said, thanks for saying that about the soul. And I said, it's hard, isn't it? He said, you never get over it. Imagine what we're doing to human beings who we are sending into combat to violate their own humanity by killing other human beings at the same time that they are expecting that they may also be going to be losing their own lives. There's got to be a better way to do this. And so as I went on with this book, that became my focus. I read that part also to suggest to you a little bit of what empathy looks like, because this book is about using our empathy as a way of going into action against war. I guess I want to shift at this moment to another part of the book. I've been talking about the individual, as a sociologist we talk about the micro level of existence, but I want to switch now to the state level, the global level, the macro level, and suggest that as peace movements go, as the anti-war movement goes, we need a plan. We need a plan for what this world is going to look like when we get peace, and when it is true peace. And we don't have a plan. So I thought I'd at least muddy the waters on that one and try to explore that a little bit in this book. And what occurred to me as I just started looking at demilitarization, I'm thinking, how realistic is demilitarization really? And so I start exploring it, and I'm starting to think about, what if we had a globally demilitarized world? What would that look like? And it immediately dawned on me that we don't think in those terms. And that we can't even get close to thinking about demilitarization at a global level until we start actually pronouncing it and saying it and thinking of it as possible. But the next immediate thing that happened to me was the awareness that there are a number of nation states in this world that are demilitarized, that have no military. Now, some of them are backed by the US military or the Australian military or, you know, another mighty force. But there's a number of them that do not have a military. So get this, 9/11 happens, and the response to it is, we're going to give the mightiest, strongest, most powerful, most thorough war against terrorism, war against Afghanistan, war against Iraq, war against anything that stands in our way, and you're with us or against us. And we're going to go to war because that's how you deal with a 9/11. Think for a moment of how Costa Rica dealt with a severely bloody coup that happened there in 1947. Thousands of Costa Ricans were killed in this coup. And a new president took over. And one of the first things he said was, we in Costa Rica will never have another war on this land because as of today, I am disbanding the military. Same possible threat, totally different responses. It's almost hard to comprehend as Americans because what we hear all day long, even those of us who are protesting it, even of those of us with critical consciousness and lots of anti-war, good anti-war energy, are hearing all day long we are the muddiest, the strongest, the most powerful, and we're going to stay that way because that's how we're going to be kept safe. And do we feel any safer? Costa Rica has not had a war on its land since 1947. And I will try to pull back on here. With the United States' arming of Contras to fight the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, some of you will remember Oliver North. He set up a base in Costa Rica. That's been the only major violation of Costa Rica's declaration of demilitarization by our country. Okay, so one more step with that then is then Oscar Arias becomes president of Costa Rica. He develops a peace accord to get rid of North and the Contras and get the United States out of there, wins the Nobel Peace Prize, and the country goes on. What I'm trying to kind of convey is that there's two totally different paradigms. And we get to choose which paradigm we want to work from. And when we choose, we can then act from that paradigm. We can organize from that paradigm. We do not have to be in the paradigm that is operative today. If we're going to have demilitarization of one state after another, it occurred to me that the one thing that stood in my way of getting to becoming a complete and utter peacenik is the possibility of another psychopath getting a hold of a country. Another Gaddafi, another Hitler, another Bush. And with that possibility, then, it made me start thinking about, okay, we could demilitarize states if we could have a global peacemaking military or force. The feminists friends don't like me to refer to it as a military. But a global peacemaking force that would be drawn from all the nations of the world that would respond to ethnic cleansing, genocide, massacres, and those kinds of things. I would just like to invite you to try on some of these utopian ideas, because we don't know how close or far away we are from them until we start playing around with them. It took one man taking the stand in Costa Rica to demilitarize that whole country, and it's lasted. There's problems with it, you know, and they of course have a police force. Every demilitarized state in this plan would be internally policed, because one would still have to deal with crime and such. However, I started this talk by talking about how men are reduced to expendable lives for war. That was the original title of this book, was Expendable Lives. To be used for war, to be used up either in a kind of long-time harm that will be done, or in the taking of their lives in combat. That violence that is trained by the military didn't begin with the military. It comes from this core masculinity, and by core I mean core socialized. I see no evidence anyplace that violence is a biological or inherited trait of men. People can go and, you know, slice up brains and find violence in different corners of it, or associate it with a Y chromosome or testosterone or those kinds of things. But they can't answer the question, if men were not socialized in the way they were, would they still be violent? And until that question is answered, the rest of that science is not science. It's not based on a scientific model. So I come back then to closing this by saying, by the end of this book, I'm looking for a way to not only talk about state demilitarization, global peacemaking efforts, but the need to remake men. For in Costa Rica, they got rid of the masculinity of war, but the masculinity of violence against women remained unchanged. 60% of Costa Rican women will be victims of violence from men in their lifetime. And so, as a feminist, I see these two as intricately connected: masculinity of war and of violence against women. Socialized, socially demanded, expected, reinforced by the military, thanked for by the President of the United States, but because it is socialized, it also can change. Thus, the second part of the title, Remaking Men. And I needed only to look at the resistors to war, those who are out there in combat or are on their way to combat, and at some moment say, no, I'm not going to do that. Or on their way to enlist and go, don't think I can quite do this. The resistors who stand up and say no, or they come back home from war, and then it finally dawns on them, because that brainwashing of military training is very, very thorough. And when it finally starts breaking away, they see what they've been through and then say no to war. So we have Veterans for Peace, we have Iraq Veterans Against the War, we have numerous veterans groups and organizations protesting the war and showing us a masculinity in the remaking. So I will leave it on that hopeful note and ask you if you have any questions, and could we have just a little bit of discussion before Project Censored and Mickey Huff come in. Yes. Yep.
Hi.
Oh, Gloria.
Hi.
Hi. Old friends.
Yeah, that's great. But I also think this socialization is a class, has a class connection? Because, I mean, I don't think my brothers were socialized for war. And maybe I'm wrong, but they didn't go to Vietnam, and that was partly because of their class. And my students at Berkeley didn't go to Vietnam, and that was partly a class thing.
Well, it's probably a Berkeley thing, too.
Yeah, no, but I mean, when we were teaching, we were very conscious that if we gave a bad grade, somebody might be going off to war. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of solidarity about that. But
yeah, sure, class is a very important thing, and in fact, the economy as it is couldn't be better for the U.S. military, because with so many young people out of work, enlistment has just shot up. It really works well for the military. So there's many, many class dimensions to it. But there is also a masculinity that transcends the classes. It transcends the cultures. I've heard the same thing from Palestinians in the West Bank when I was in Bethlehem that I've heard in talking with American soldiers about the experience of combat, about the pressures to fight, and why you would do that. Yeah, to being the protector. Yes.
I look at this as different than the way I've heard it so far portrayed by you. I don't look at it as masculinity as a bad thing. I look at it as a perversion of masculinity, because the way where this comes from is that you know, women were the life givers. They were already so much at risk from a high mortality rate with childbirth that the guys had to be the ones taking some of the risks, had to do the work of protecting, taking the risky jobs. That's why even today you're going to find guys who are the majority of the fishermen, the majority of doing these other dangerous types of work. The perversion comes when you get large groups of people together. You get the mob mentality. And I am a veteran, and there's a disassociation that goes on.
Yes.
All right? But it's not true masculinity, and that's why when I hear you say, it's men, it's men, it's men, it's not men. It's the whole society, and it's an aspect of it that has been twisted.
I see what you're saying, and I think you make some really important points, and I think there are really important differences between men and women. And I don't mean to suggest that there is an innate masculinity that is a perverted thing. Because I'm a sociologist, I see all of it as socialized. And all of it is coming through. Let me just make it personal. My brothers and I watched the same cowboy movies when we were kids. It never once occurred to me that I would ever hit another person, shoot another person, and my brothers were immediately starting to play that out. That's socialization, and it's gendered at the same time. So I think both are going on.